Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to the marketplace. My name is Darryl Kwao. Coming up this afternoon, inflation rate for the month of April hits 10.6%, the highest in 8 months. We have analysis coming up. Also coming up this afternoon, GRA rolls out tax incentives to cushion businesses amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Also ahead, the spotlight is on small-scale mining 2 years after the ban on operations of the miners was lifted. We'll have the details of these stories and others coming up in this half hour of business news. Welcome back to the marketplace. We begin with the latest inflation figures released by the Ghana Statistical Service, and the rate for the month of April has jumped to 10.6% from 7.8%. In March, we are told is the highest in 8 months. Now, the recent astronomical hikes in prices of food items amid the COVID-19 pandemic, coupled with partial lockdown effected for 3 weeks, were factors that contributed to this jump. Samuel Kobna-Enim is government statistician.
Ladies and gentlemen, we share with you CPI and rate of inflation for the month of April 2020. CPI for April 2020 was 116.6 relative to 113.0 in the month of March 2020. This culminates in 3.2 month-on-month inflation, that is between March 2020 and April 2020. On a year-on-year basis, this translates into a 10.6 change in general price levels over the month of April 2019 and the month of April 2020. This means that in the month of April 2020, the general price level was 10.6% higher than April 2019. We do the disaggregation based on source by sharing with you the food inflation and the non-food inflation. And food inflation for the month of April 2020 was 14.4 relative to 7.7 for non-food inflation. Because of the special circumstance that we find ourselves in, we give you a sense of the average food inflation over the past 8 months preceding April 2020. That is from the month of April 2019 to the month of March 2020. And we see that averagely it was about 7.9% from August 2019 to March 2020. So the difference between the average of the past 8 months and the month of April 2020 is 6.5%. In contrast to the spike for food inflation, we see a slight drop in non-food inflation by comparing the average from the month of August 2019 to March 2020, which we recorded 7.8% relative to 7.7% for the month of April 2020. From a locally produced perspective and an imported commodity perspective, we realize that locally produced items was 13.1% and inflation for food items was 4.9%. This is attributed to the fact that food inflation that is driving inflation for the month of April 2020 is largely locally produced oriented. We give you further disaggregation by highlighting on the impact of food inflation from both a year-on-year perspective and a month-on-month perspective. From a year-on-year perspective, we see that the contribution of food inflation was 60%, whereas from a month-on-month perspective, the contribution of food inflation was more than 4/5, specifically 82.5%, which means that the contribution of food inflation to the 10.6 inflation that we reported earlier on was driven largely, that is 4/5 of it, between increases in prices of food from the month of March 2020 to April 2020.
Government statistician Professor Samuel Kobna-Enim breaking down the figures for us at a press briefing earlier today. Joining me for a conversation around this is economist with Data Bank Research, Courage Boti. Courage, great to have you this afternoon. We saw this coming, the highest inflation rate in 8 months amid the COVID-19 pandemic and lockdowns. This was expected, wasn't it?
Yeah, certainly expected. Good afternoon to your listeners. If you see our attitudes and understandably so ahead of the lockdown, where a lot of people have to flood the market to stock their homes. One, because we don't know how long the lockdown was going to be. And then, of course, the market women also cash in on the situation. Well, definitely there will be a supply shock from that angle. And from a basic demand supply analysis, obviously prices are supposed to go up. We all experienced it. The price of on a long car of Gary that ordinarily would have been around 7-8 cedis shot up to as much as 25 cedis. We've seen 2 bags of yam ordinarily that were 5 cedis thereabout in the regions of 20-25 cedis. We all experience it. So I think that is really what is translating into the higher prices we are seeing and the higher inflation we're seeing for the month of April. And understandably so is driven largely by the food component, which actually has been the major driver of inflation for some time now. We see for the month that the food group alone contributed about 60% to the total inflation print for the month. And that is, speaking to what we saw in the month of April.
And what are the implications of this single jump to 10.6% on our economy, looking at the fact that we are not yet done with the COVID-19 pandemic?
This will not persist. I think this is a one-off situation. Probably the May print will also show something slightly higher or just around the current level, but thereafter it should come down. It should come down because it was an anomaly induced by the lockdown where prices had to soar. But we saw that immediately after the lockdown, even the 2 weeks after when you go to the market, things that were selling at very absurd prices came down quite considerably. So with that effect out in, say, 2-3 months' time, we should see inflation reverting to around the midpoint of the medium-term target of the 8% level. So we do not expect this hike to be sustained or even higher levels going forward. We think it's an anomaly or it's something caused by the situation we found ourselves in. And once that corrects and that effect is off the computation, we should see inflation revert to where it ought to be ultimately. And that also tells us that, of course, the Monetary Policy Committee will decide on the policy rate soon with the kind of inflation we have. And given that under the circumstances, banks are not too willing to lend because of the risk of accumulating non-performing loans, it will not be prudent for the Bank of Ghana on even the liquidity caution alone or liquidity side alone to want to ease the monetary policy rate. And now that inflation has jumped to where it is now, if care is not taken and you add extra liquidity to the system, what you might do is you must spiral inflation to the upside, which nobody wants at this point. So we are expecting that when the Bank of Ghana meets, somewhere along the week, or I think, they should be holding the monetary policy rate where it is now.
Okay, so you're expecting that the MPC will hold the rate, but let me get this right. So we've seen that the lockdown restrictions have been eased, and we've seen that businesses have returned, people are operating now. Chances that this 10.6 may change, how significantly?
Say that again.
So I was asking, seeing that businesses have returned, the lockdowns have restrictions have been eased, how significant will we see the change in the next briefing by the Statistical Service on our inflation rate?
I would have to, this was released not long ago. I would have to do the computations, to reach a fair idea on where it could be next month. But my back of the envelope estimation will be that, of course, the price jump is actually correcting and corrected almost immediately. Not completely, but there was some significant correction. And then, of course, with all companies opening up and then production, we can't meet the production lag or the supply lag immediately because a chunk of the stuff that need to be imported also could not come in because of the COVID and then the lockdown the restrictions on travels and all of that. So there will, and I think Guta warned us about this, sometime earlier in March thereabout, that they are unable to import, and then with this COVID situation, it's going to lead in jumping prices. So there will not be immediate recovery towards the 7.8 we were, but we could be seeing something around the 8% level in the next 2-3 months.
Okay, and a quick one, just because it came up yesterday, the finance minister has been tasked to come up with an economic recovery plan, and looking at the figures that are not looking so good right now, where does he start from?
Well, the recovery should be targeting sectors that can turn around quickly. I understand that, I mean, virtually every sector has taken a hit from this COVID. Agriculture, trade, manufacturing, whatever, hospitality, everyone. My question is this time to be doing long-term investments that its return will be seen in 2, 3, 4 years' time? Because what we need now is the investments that can keep jobs, investments that can boost our domestic production levels. I think we had a good start from the investment in the pharmaceutical industries when we had to produce PPEs by our own, and we were facing the risk of having to depend on imports, and then the borders are locked. And we turn around quickly, produce some domestically. What other stuff can we look at that we can produce domestically that could be import substituting, that could employ a number of people, sustain income levels? I think those are where the focus should be. Again, we should be looking at targeting agriculture also. So because ultimately, buoyant, but people are eating anywhere. What do we need to sustain the food supply chain so that we avoid spikes in prices and then ultimately going into starvation and all of that because we can't supply now? So targeted solutions to key sectors that can actually turn around quickly is what I think the recovery plan should be focusing now.
And if you could just do this in 30 seconds for me, just because you also mentioned the MPC rate, you're saying that you expect the central bank to hold at the current rate. How about businesses who are looking for reliefs further? Do you think it will be out of the ordinary to sort of want to reduce the policy rate?
You see, the argument will always be there, but the point is this: yes, the previous MPC did not only cut the policy rate by 150 basis points, they also came with a lot of, you will call it unconventional policy actions. I mean, reducing the what do you call it, the required reserve ratio, and then all those other stuff that came with it, which frees liquidity into the system. In addition to that, the Bank of Ghana arranged with these banks to make available some 3 billion in credits. To what extent has those monies been disbursed? It is actually leading to increased liquidity in the system. I mean, is this time to cut the policy rate further to further increase the liquidity when those monies have not been deployed? They haven't been deployed because banks may be wary of high NPLs and all of that. Actually, I do not think the most urgent thing now is easing liquidity in the system.
Okay, Courage Boti, thanks very much indeed for your perspective this afternoon. We appreciate it as always. Now, the Ghana Revenue Authority has finally rolled out tax incentives to help cushion businesses and individuals in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. There's more in the following report.
The notice follows the passage of the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2020, which seeks to exempt income tax on certain withdrawals from the statutory voluntary pension scheme. Parliament also approved that items that are donated to fight COVID-19 are granted as relief items for that purposes. According to the notice, individuals and employers that should have filed their tax returns by April this year now have 2 months extension. This should mean that the necessary payment should be made by June this year to file for their returns. For corporate institutions and firms, they now have up to 6 months to file their returns. For instance, if their financial year ended in December 2019, that company is now required to file its returns by June 2020. Firms that are making items and goods donations to help fight COVID-19 would also be granted some relief from VAT purposes, meaning that the donations made will not qualify as deductions against tax income. The Commissioner General has also offered amnesty to firms and individuals that are indebted to the GRA, but they should also settle their tax returns by June this year in order to be excused from any charges or penalties. The Commissioner of the Ghana Revenue Authority sees this as one of the measures to encourage persons to pay their taxes. The GRA has also notified the public that any worker that has lost his or her job as a result of COVID-19 can make withdrawals from their tier contributions, but would not attract the usual 15% income tax. Health workers' income from April to June this year will be exempted from income tax. Many would be looking forward to see whether or not these measures would help encourage firms and individuals to be tax compliant, as well as bring the required relief to taxpayers.
Small and medium-scale mining is believed to contribute about 30,000 jobs. The lifting of the ban on small-scale mining almost 2 years on, miners say several reforms have occurred, including getting professionals, but the Association of Small-Scale Miners says there is more that needs to be done to weed out the charlatans. There's more in this report.
2017, when small-scale mining was banned, one of the reasons was its impact on the environment, especially on water and the destruction of the vegetation. Well, in 2018 August, more than a year after the ban was lifted with new conditions. 900 small-scale miners were given the license to operate. I have come to OCM to find out exactly what the new regulations have been and whether people here are keeping or sticking to the new regulations. One of them is actually community mining, which has an impact on the people in the community benefiting directly from mining activities and, of course, being involved. So they have become the watchdogs. I'm going out there to speak with people who own this concession and how the community mining works. The property is 10 concessions put together, made of 25 acres per concession. A geologist and a financial manager at site, this was usually not the norm on small-scale mines. These pits, which ideally will be covered this time, in the past would not have been. The Environmental Protection Agency then inspects and grants a certificate within 180 days before a new pit is dug. Water on the concession has been drawn from a nearby stream and cordoned off to prevent chemicals from seeping into river bodies. This was also a requirement from Water Resources. Having put all of these in place, the community has confidence Gold Axe will do responsible mining and has been selected for community mining here. Following the Mining Act 703, Section 81 to 99 to the teeth, the community has decided to be involved in making sure miners do not flout the law, especially those connected to river bodies and the environment.
First, I think the documentation, the control from the community level to the district level to the national level. Yeah, things are now regularized.
Specifically, what is regularized?
The license to mine, license to do exploration, it's regularized. You can't do it the other way, not as a business as usual. Okay, you must go through all the processes because the community is empowered, the district is empowered, and the nationals are empowered too.
When you travel between Kumasi and then Takwa using the Obuasi Road, prior to the ban, you see a lot of illegal mining activities by the roadside. But during the ban, those mining stopped. And it's evident. No, as we speak, we don't have incidents where you will see glaringly people mining along the roads and all that. Perhaps that is an attitude that has changed.
When illegal mining was rife, more than 200,000 young people were involved. World Bank data says close to 15% of them were women and 6% of the concessions were also for them. More than 30,000 people are employed legally in artisanal and small-scale mines. Gold Axe is expecting to help the people of Jampomani in the Fantiakwa South District lift the youth unemployment, but will need further investment.
10 concessions.
Na the thing say community mining
Community mining creates so many job opportunities for us, and so to develop the community and the country at large, we support the mining activities here. For now, there's a total of 10 concessions.
Nti obi bia obeba se ope concession no me na beba bisimi so nti obi bisimi so na me do company for je otumi bia ma be years asini bia ma.
I am the youth leader in this community and I assist interested parties with intentions to mine in my community. I first ensure that all the concessions are endorsed by the Minerals Commission. The mining really helps us, particularly the youth.
The genesis of community mining is job creation, just to let them mine, but in the right way, so that they will not disturb the vegetation. So we want to go into the last scale.
The Association of Artisanal Small and Medium Scale Miners admits a lot has changed, but fears illegal mining is far from over. Kofi Irenchi adds, while the small-scale legal mining has resumed, more than 40% of their members whose licenses were given back to them cannot go back to do business.
With the last time we checked, we had less than 40% of the licensed miners operating. Though the good news is that Minerals Commission, it's also licensing new areas and all that. Perhaps we're going to have a bottleneck of people who want to go through vetting because of I said that the vetting process has stalled. And then again, the ban on importation of earth-moving equipment, excavators and coal really is affecting our operations because not everybody had their equipment in-house.
However, some more will want to enter the sector, but vetting, which allows them concessions and mines, has stalled.
The initial 900 that went through vetting did so because of the process resources and all that. But after that, people were still going through vetting. As we speak, there are people who are waiting to be vetted, which is out of the 1,350 that was quoted by the Ministerial Committee on Illegal Mining. But just that the vetting process has stalled. We don't know why and why it's not. So you see people who really want to work and they have all their documentation ready for vetting to be done, but it's like the process is stalled as we speak.
Between 2013 and 2018, the World Bank funded the sector in training and inputs to make the sector environmentally compliant.
Now, the Ghana Tourism Authority has given green light to operators in the hospitality sector to open up their businesses for operations. The authority, however, directs strict adherence to social distancing protocols, amongst other containment measures announced by government. This means, with the exception of nightclubs, others such as hotels, restaurants, and other eateries can operate. Chief Executive of the Tourism Authority, Kwesi Agyemang, spoke with Ernest Menu on News Desk.
And we said you cannot entertain sitting guests. So you could only do takeaway and pickups. For EICC4, you could go ahead. But what we've added on is that you have to keep the social distancing. So yes, you can admit guests to come in, but you must ensure that the social distancing protocols are adhered to. One, you must ensure that your staff are wearing the necessary PPEs to prevent the spread of the disease if any of them are infected. So those are the things that we sought to clarify. So currently EI65 is fine. EI64 is in place, and that really allows for them to operate. We are part of the National COVID Task Force that includes the Ghana Health Service, the military, the Ghana Police Service, NADMO, the ambulance, NCA and other agencies, FDA and the rest. And so these directives, as issued to the public and also to the operators, have also been sent to the operational team.
And this has been The Marketplace. My name is Darryl Kwao. This morning is on our website, myjoyonline.com/business. Thanks for watching.